Well, thank you for coming, everybody. I'm Seth Wallach. I'm Community Outreach Coordinator for the Suffolk County Water Authority. And the reason that we've created this program for you this afternoon is to hopefully educate the landscape and irrigation community on the importance of water conservation, but more importantly, give you some actual best practices that you can take away and use for your clients and at your job sites. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation. That just keeps us on track, keeps things easier for us from a timing perspective. But as your questions come up, you can type them into the chat in Teams. I'll be monitoring the chat window throughout today's presentation. And then at the end, we'll also be giving away a free smart controller courtesy of Hunter. So if you would be interested in that, just make sure to type your email into the chat window. And then once the meeting is over, we'll send an email to the winner who will be chosen at random. So as you may or may not know, irrigation is by far the most consumptive use of water on Long Island. And we do not say that to shame anybody, but the reason we do say that is to make sure that everyone's aware of it, and so that we can start the process of working together and making sure we're all using our precious resource carefully. So what I'm going to be doing here today is I'm going to be giving you the Water Authority's perspective on things, how you can help us help you. And then if that, I know it may sound a little strange, the people that sell water asking you to use less water, but I promise you that's really the best solution for everybody. And then once I'm done, I'll hand it off to Mike and Kevin to give you the how piece of it, the actual actionable steps that you can take. So Mike, if you want to pop down 2 slides, this slide just introduces me. I'm representing both the Water Authority and the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection during today's meeting. So first off, we'll go with who is the Water Authority. We're an independent public benefit corporation operating under the Public Authorities Law of New York State. And essentially what that means is we provide water on a non-for-profit basis. We serve about 1.2 million people in Suffolk County, and we're one of the largest groundwater suppliers in the country. So really quick, just a little bit about us. We've got 633 total public supply wells at 240 pump stations countywide, and we have 68 storage tanks in our system with 71.6 million gallons of water. Shameless plug, if you're interested in storage tanks, by the way, we just released an episode of the SCWA podcast that is all about water storage tanks. So what about water, wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Available daily pumpage, we're at 210 million gallons. That's what we average on a given day. And then in peak season during the summer, that shoots up to 470 million gallons on average. So you can see already just the huge difference between what we call pumping season and non-pumping season.
I keep hitting the wrong one, sorry.
Oh, good. So who is LICAP? Who is this other organization I'm here representing today? Well, LICAP is a bi-county entity who was formed to address both quantity and quality issues that are facing Long Island's aquifer on a regional scale. So who sits on LICAP? It's every water supplier in Nassau and Suffolk counties. It's representatives from both county executives, both county legislatures, and both county departments of health, in addition to both soil and water conservation districts, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and the United States Geological Survey. So really, every stakeholder in terms of aquifer management is represented on LICAP. And the whole idea of this commission is to just make sure we're bringing everybody to the table and we're talking solutions on a regional basis. So why is water conservation important? I understand that in some respects, I'm preaching to the choir a little bit here, but so I'll move through these pretty quickly. But the short of it is that Long Island's groundwater supply, while it is sufficient, we do have, we wouldn't run out of water for a couple of 100 years, even if it stopped raining today. But that doesn't mean the supply is limitless, and that doesn't mean we don't have to use it carefully. So a big one for us is help us help you. Higher water usage means the Water Authority has to install more and more infrastructure, well for us costs about $1 million plus to install. And those costs are ultimately passed along to our customers. So the higher our cost to provide water, the higher water bills become. Nobody wants that. And so we try to keep those as manageable as possible. The best way to help us out is actually to spread out your water usage. So most people's sprinkler systems go off between 3 a.m. and 7 a.m. in the morning, and that actually could affect water pressure for your morning shower. It could affect water pressure that we need for fire protection in the system for fire hydrants. So it's important that if we can even smooth out the peak, even without using less, it's still a great boon to the Water Authority's infrastructure. And as we see here, overpumping can actually have negative water quality impacts. We see this in coastal communities, especially. Long Island has tons of coastal communities, of course. In Long Beach, I know Long Beach Water District over in Nassau, they actually had some problems with saltwater intrusion. So that can foul the well forever. We just want to make sure that we're not doing that. So residential water use. According to the EPA, more than 9 billion gallons of water a day are used in the United States, and most of that ends up being lawn irrigation. The problem with that is, as you look at our second bullet, the EPA estimates that as much as 50% of that water is actually getting wasted. It's not watering lawns at all. It is superfluous water. And so we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to correct that, correct those inefficiencies in irrigation methods. That's what we're here to talk about today. That's a lot of what Mike and Kevin are going to cover after I'm done. And irrigation control technologies are a huge piece of that. One thing the Water Authority we've been really pushing is smart controllers. I know the Irrigation Association of New York has been extremely helpful in helping us preach that gospel all over Long Island. Smart controllers really can become a great solution for Long Island. So in Suffolk County, about 70% of all the water we pump, again, goes to outdoor uses. And people are surprised to know that nearly 3/4 of our wells in Suffolk are actually turned off during the winter. And as I said, increased demand for us leads to more overall costs for our customers. So just to give you an idea, just to help you visualize, this is pumpage in Suffolk and pumpage in Nassau by season. You can see the light blue line is October through April. The darker blue line is May through September. Truth be told, we start seeing that uptick even before May. We start to see it even as we get to the end of March. So this graph really doesn't even do it justice in terms of the stark differences in pumping. And you can see the difference is even more stark in Suffolk than it is in Nassau. So we like to call this graph the irrigation situation. Mike, if you want to click, I think it's 3 times, it'll actually put some labels on some of these lines. So essentially what you're looking at here, this dark blue line on the bottom is winter pumpage. The x-axis here is time of day with 00 being midnight, and then the y-axis is gallons per minute pumped by the Water Authority. Like I said, the dark blue line is winter. As you can see, the orange line is summer. The red line is a summer weekend, so even a little bit higher. And then Mike, click one more time for me. You'll notice the light blue line is a summer rainy day. In theory, a rainy day during the summer should look a lot like a typical day in the winter, but you can see how high this light blue line is. That's simply so that people can water their lawns in the rain. It's for no other reason. And so that's the line I really want to point out to you today. That's the problem that we're here to address. So what are we doing from the Water Authority's perspective to combat this? Well, we're asking everybody to spread out the peak. We're asking everybody to stop watering during 3 and 7 whenever possible. If you could consider an odd-even watering schedule, even better. That's when odd-numbered houses water on odd days, even-numbered addresses water on even days. As long as nobody is using the water every day, that can really help our infrastructure here. And then probably the best thing you can do, like we said, invest in that smart controller. It'll ultimately pay for itself over time in water savings alone. Yep. So the average residential user, just so everyone understands, uses, I would say, just under 130,000 gallons a year. We did have one customer, because of their geothermal heating and cooling system, And because they were irrigating a huge estate, we had one user in 2018 that used 22 million gallons of water in 1 year, which is more than Southampton Hospital, as you can see at 14.5. So these are the things we're looking to get away from. So studies show that most smart controllers can actually save up to 20% of the water applied as opposed to a traditional irrigation controller. And this is significant considering 70% of the household water use on Long Island is outdoor usage. Not all outdoor usage is irrigation, of course. There's filling pools and outdoor hoses and things like that. But if we can get 20% from irrigation controllers as a savings, that could be absolutely huge for this region. The yearly SCWA bill comes to about $360 a year. So if you're talking about a savings from a smart controller, you're talking about maybe $72 a year per customer. Again, that's a huge chunk of an annual bill that could be saved just with this quick switch of a controller. And the controller itself doesn't even have to cost money to purchase or cost money to install. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, how the Water Authority will actually incentivize our customers to invest in smart controllers. This slide's is what we like to call a win-win-win. So when customers use smart controllers, they're not only helping to protect our sole source aquifer, they're keeping costs down for us and therefore for themselves, and they're saving money off their water bill. And most smart controllers are easy to control right on your phone. There's an app. Mike can attest to this. It really could not be easier, the technology that we're looking at right now. So I mentioned earlier how we incentivize our customers to invest in smart controllers. We've got what we call our Waterwise programs, and that gives customers up to 50% off their water bill if they show us proof of purchase of a smart controller or other water saving devices. Faucet aerators are on here as well. Smart valves are included in this program as well. Low flow shower heads, things of that nature. And the reason we wanted to make sure. What was that? I'm sorry.
Sorry, Seth. Rain sensors also?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Yep, rain sensors are absolutely eligible for that credit of up to $50. So, and the reason we wanted to let you know this is because, if you're doing an install on a customer's home, or if you're, taking care of a customer's lawn maintenance and you're in charge of that irrigation controller, this is a program that you can actually tell them about, and you can even apply for the credit on the customer's behalf. If they don't want to do the paperwork, which it's a very quick online form, by the way, but even if they want to have you fill it out for them, we accept that too. As long as we get that proof of purchase, our online form accepts PDFs, it accepts JPEGs, pretty much any file you got, we'll take as proof. You could find it at scwa.com/waterwise. We'll take you right to that online form. And if you have questions, you could always email us at waterwisecheckup@scwa.com. We'll also be starting up very soon our Waterwise Checkups program, which actually sends one of our water use experts into the home for a one-on-one consultation that gives customers a customized plan to save water. So irrigation is just a piece of that. That expert will actually estimate the point of the amount of water used at any given point in the home in any given room. And once we've got that estimate, we actually can give you a customized plan to cut down. That's a program we've done pretty successfully. I'd say for about 4 years now. It was on hold due to COVID-19, but we've just amended our COVID policies to start going back into homes again. And so just the last thing I'd like to give you today is a little bit of information about the Our Water, Our Lives program. This is the Long Island Commission for Aquifer Protection's big push to get people to conserve water island-wide. You see, we've got buy-in from both county governments, the environmental community, the Irrigation Association. Just in this one photo, we've got over 4,000 Long Islanders who have pledged to do their part to conserve water. That is absolutely huge. Studies show that when people take a pledge, they're more likely to take action. We know it's not legally binding, but we're already starting to see the benefits of these pledges in terms of usage. And if you're interested, please go to ourwaterourlives.com or follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're always putting out great water saving tips. And with that,
Hey, Seth, thank you very much. As always, appreciate the opportunity to help educate the contractors to help ultimately the customers. My name is Mike Dyer. I am a CIC, which from the National Irrigation Association is a certificate that I've taken a few courses and I know a little bit about it. It's called a Certified Irrigation Contractor. Basically, it's just to make sure that I know my math and I know what I'm doing when I'm out there servicing and installing irrigation systems. Now, the whole thing that we're talking about today is just saving water, ways to save irrigation water, which is, as Seth has already said, it's the biggest strain on their system. And we want to maximize the water application efficiency. You know, just because you're putting water down, if you're not putting it down well or efficiently, you're going to waste a lot of water. We are always watering for the weakest part of a system. So if we do things incorrectly, we're going to have to overwater a lot of areas just to keep that one little spot from being brown, when usually it's the way it was installed that is probably the problem source. So basic tips and products that we're going to go over, as Seth already pointed out in his slide, rain sensors installed correctly, please. I always call it an umbrella. Anytime you are putting up a rain sensor, take a minute before you install it. Look straight up and look around. Make sure there's no roof overhang over you. Make sure you're not next to the side of a building. Anything that's going to obstruct rainwater from falling on that. I had one guy install one about 3 foot down from the side of a tall building and told me it was going to get wet there. And I pointed out to him, when it's pouring rain and I've got no place to run, I generally run to the side of a building and I can stand there and let the shower go by, because odds are I'm not going to get wet. Rain always has a little bit of movement to it because of the wind or the direction it's coming from. It very rarely falls straight down. Also, use the same type of head on the entire zone. We've gotten some new products in there. You can kind of mix and match, but as a general rule, no mist on rotors. They do not water equally, and you're going to flood an area while you're trying to get water out on a large area. And we'll get into that as we get further on. Kevin's going to cover some of that. Stagger zones. What do I mean about stagger zones? Well, when I first started doing this, I always thought it was great. I'd have the system start. It would come on at the curb. It would go to the next one just above the sidewalk. It would go to the middle of the lawn. It would go to the upper part of the lawn, watering back down. And then I would start going around the side of the house until I came to the other side of the house along the other driveway. Problem with this is I'm putting water right back on top of something that I just put water on. I have taken up all that pore space, all that area for water to go into the ground and not run. So if you stagger your zones around and you let an area sit for a while before you put water on it from another zone, that is the best way we're going to apply water to the system. Smart controllers. We know that. We've heard it. We know the numbers are there. Smart controllers really give us the ability to tailor the watering to what is going on in the season. What is happening that week? What is the trend? Where is it going? You have cloud-based and you have on-site versions. On-site versions are great. If you're out in a place that you can't get a decent signal and it's not going to work, the on-sites work very well. You just have to make sure, once again, they're exposed to the sun and they're exposed to the rain. So you want to put them on a location where they're going to get 6 to 8 hours of uninterrupted sun and where there's nothing overhanging it, so that the sensor part for the rain will not get in shadow. Spread out your start times. We've had this argument in the Irrigation Association for quite a long time. But if you could at least try and split something up with your start times, if you don't want to do it on existing customers that have already got an established time and they're used to it, as you're putting new systems in, start doing something like this. You know, if the house ends with a 0, 1, or 2, start that one at midnight. If you start at 3, 4, or 5, start at 1 a.m. And if it's 6, 7, 8, or 9, start at 2 a.m. Just do something up. That way, not everybody is coming on at 2 o'clock in the morning and running till 6 o'clock in the morning, stressing those wrong hours for the Water Authority. If we can move that back and help them maintain their water pressure, maintain their water level as we're doing what we have necessary to do, it will make a lot of impact less. You can even start in the backyard. I mean, with the smart controllers and multiple programs, maybe do some of the zones in the way backyard or way off onto the sides of the property if they're larger properties, areas that people are not going to be crawling through or wandering through at 1, 2 o'clock in the morning when they're coming in from being out at night. Remember, a wet customer is never a happy customer. And what I did here is I created something because we just had this snow. So I wanted to equate some issues with something that we can relate to a little bit. So it's a little corny. I apologize for it, but it's a way that I'm hoping I can get the point across a little easier as we get further into the day. Here's an example. I have 3 different snow blowers. One can do 1 square foot a minute. That's A. B can do 2 square feet a minute, and C can do 4 square feet a minute. If you have 3 employees pull up to the same property, they're going to be working at the same time. So kind of like one zone being run at a time. The property has 3 areas to be cleaned: a 10 by 10, a 20 by 10, and a 20 by 20. Which machine goes where and how much time does it take? Well, once again, 10 by 10 is for 1 square foot. B is going to be 2 square foot, and C, that slide is out of order, people. I apologize. The red box should be machine A. So machine A does a 10 by 10. It's 100 square feet. 1 square foot a minute. That takes 100 minutes to do. The blue box is going to be machine B. That's 10 by 20, 200 square feet. So 200 square feet with a 2 square foot a minute, we're going to be at 100 minutes. You kind of see where we're going here. In the green box, it's machine C, and machine C is 20 by 20. It's 400 square feet. 400 square feet divided by 4 is 100 minutes. So all 3 people, all 3 areas are going to be finished at the same time on that property. So basically what we just said is the same thing. Everything is 100 minutes. But what happens if we used the wrong machine there, or too big a machine? If we use the 2 square foot a minute machine, it would only take us 50 minutes. It would take us half the time. And if we use the 4 square foot minute machine on the small area, it will only take us 25. And we're seeing the same thing when we get into the using machine B. That should be at 2 square feet a minute. Boy, I messed up on these slides. I apologize, people. Thought I corrected those. So basically, when you use the right size machine, you're going to see we're back to 100 minutes. And if we use the 4 square foot, we're going to be down to 50 minutes. But once again, we're all working on the same location. We want to finish things at the same time. And we'll just go through A there because it's a. So basically, you can see when you use the right one for the right size, you're going to finish at the same time. And that's really what we want you to do when you're doing nozzles. That's why we do this, because we're going to explain installing a rotor head nozzle. Most of you guys, which shocks me, you buy cases of rotor heads with nozzles already installed. And you really should not be using the same size nozzle in a head if it's on the same zone. They should be proportional to what the other heads are. It'll help you determine how to apply the right amount of water. So basically, a 90 degree is a quarter circle. You see I have the red, same color key. Half circle is 180, and a full is 360. And by the way, so that's 1 gallon a minute if you wanted to break it down, if these were all in the same zone, 2 gallon a minute, and on the 360 would be 4. If for some reason we had a 3/4, guess what? 3 gallon a minute, be hidden right in there. So basically that's what I just told you. And this is just something that I threw in there. I didn't give you any context, so there's many of answers you could do on this, but let's just assume we had some quarters and some halves in here. So if you had a 10 gallon minute water source at 65 PSI, how many rotors can you put on a zone? This is more, there are more answers than this depending on the nozzles you use and how many heads and what ratios they are on, but this was just an idea. So 2 quarters at 1.5 GPM and 2 halves at 3 GPM, because remember, 2 quarters make a 90. So that's what 2 quarters of 90, they make 180. So that's why we have 3 gallons per minute, because it's double. So the whole total there is 9 gallons a minute. Follow this simple rule and most of your problem jobs will disappear. When I started in this business and we went from pop-up heads, brass heads, and we started going to rotor heads and impact heads, I didn't know this. I had all kinds of problems July and August. I took a class, I found out about nozzling, I followed this simple rule, and 90%, 95% of my self-inflicted wounds disappeared. My life was a lot better. So this is just something we have coming up. The Northeast Conference, it's next week. It's up in Foxwoods. If anybody wants to join us, there's still time to sign up and get up there. IANY.org, that's our website. We're always looking for new members, just like any organization. And that's why we go out, we do this education. We're trying to help everybody. I have finished what I'm going to say. I'm going to skip through the one that says questions. We're going to leave that to the end. Up next is Mr. Kevin Lewis from Hunter Irrigation, and he's going to carry on. Kevin, you ready to go?
Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate the time. And just going to go through a presentation here. My approach is a little bit different. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about selling smart controllers and why. So this is kind of a type of training that I do with contractors on an individual basis. And we kind of walk through the different aspects and features of a controller. And I talk about basically matching up some of those features to the customer and why they might want to, install a smart controller at the house. So we're going to talk a little bit about sales. I'm going to break it down for you the way that I kind of break it down for people during trainings. And we'll talk about the impact that a smart controller is going to have on the rest of the system, and some things that you might want to take into consideration when you're installing them. A big sticking point for me is the settings that you create for a customer who's getting into smart control. Many of the products that are on the market have default settings for how they're going to adjust to weather. Those default settings, I'm not sure exactly where they apply to in the world, but it's not necessarily exactly where you're installing the controller. So it would be a good idea for whatever brand controller that you're installing to make sure you're familiar with how the thing adjusts and set those things up so that you're getting the most out of your most water savings and the best settings for the controller to the site where it's being installed. And then I'm going to talk a little bit at the end, a little bit of a play on what Mike was talking about with his snowblower example. We're going to talk about balancing and nozzling and 3 main components to an irrigation system, aside from the controls that typically result in the most water savings. We like to point out pressure regulation, check valves, and high efficiency nozzles. So, without further ado, so this is kind of how I've positioned it to people from a sales standpoint. Everybody's kind of been beaten up over the last couple of years. Most of us contractors are real busy doing things, installing heads, doing renovations. You have a unique opportunity to sell people a smart controller or a Wi-Fi controller, connected controller. It's not necessarily for people who have irrigation systems, they already have an irrigation controller and it's already on a program and on a schedule, and it's opening and closing valves at certain days for certain amounts of time. So you're going to sell them a Wi-Fi controller, which at the end of the day is going to take the place of this controller that they have in place. So to me, it's about, how you're positioning it to them if you're looking to sell it. The nice thing about this, kind of a play off of what Seth mentioned before about these smart controllers being a win-win-win, I look at it in a similar manner. It is a win-win-win situation. For the homeowner, they get a pretty cool new toy that they get to install in their house and kind of show their friends that they could turn things on and off with a cell phone. They save water which is cool because it helps them to save money at the end. It also helps the Suffolk County Water Authority and all their neighbors to balance out water usage, to decrease the amount of water that's being used, to skip irrigations that are going to take place after a rainfall, which is something that Seth also mentioned. But for you guys, you get to sell them a controller, and maybe I do too. So it's a good thing to get in there and do. And that's all great, but first thing you need to do is you need to sell it to them. So you got to appeal to the customer. And I like to kind of break it down into different categories of what people are looking for. So you got to kind of figure out what feature it is within that system that is going to appeal to that customer that you're talking to. And I'm going to go through that in a minute. But and once you sell it, you need to set it up. You know, I meet with contractors who install Wi-Fi controllers. They take one controller down, they put the other one up. Maybe they connect it to Wi-Fi and then they hand it over to the customer. If that's your model, that's one thing. In my opinion, you're the expert. You're being brought in there for your years of experience in the industry. You probably know how to set an irrigation controller, just a base controller, better than the homeowner does. My point is learn the system, set it up right. What's the best setting for this house? And once it is set up, chances are it's going to reduce watering, and that's going to have another impact on you. So understand who you're selling to, what motivates them, and what their expectations are. Okay, who's buying this controller? Who's calling you about possibly buying this controller? And what is it that's going to motivate them to go ahead and pull the trigger on it? So I've broken it down into 5 categories. This first one in particular, this is kind of a sign of the times. You know, I know contractors throughout my territory who are going out and promoting a Wi-Fi controller as a no-touch irrigation system. They don't need to come into your house to shut things off. They don't need to come into your house to turn things on. You know, there are, whether you like it or not, there are a certain element of the population that just don't want you in their house anymore. They don't want you touching their stuff. They don't want you, you know, giving them bills or handing them, you know, folders or proposals or anything like that. They want to be dealt with and sold to in a different way. Why not deal with them in the way that they want to be dealt with? And this controller can do that for you. Another group of people, maybe these are the people that Seth's trying to create. Maybe they're just, you know, people with good morals, whatever the case might be. There is also a certain element of the people that you're dealing with who are just interested in saving water. They want to be good to the environment. These control systems definitely have something that will speak to those people as well. I'm sure you guys see this slide pop up. You know, most people probably picture a customer that they know who is a fanatic about their landscape. Just because you're installing a smart controller or something that's supposed to reduce water usage doesn't mean that there should be an impact to the landscape. And in fact, if you're selling it right and you know the system well enough, it's actually the opposite. We're going to reduce your water. You're probably going to get rid of some of the fungus that you've developed over the years at times when you've watered too much. On top of that, we have some features built into the system that are going to notify us when things happen on your irrigation system. And so we can be proactive about dealing with them ahead of something playing itself out in your landscape, something burning up, something flooding out. So we have stuff that can speak to that person as well. We all know it. A lot of people just want to keep up with the Joneses. My neighbor's got this, I need that. You know, my brother-in-law just got this and installed it. I want one of those too. If you don't think that people are that way, you're not paying attention. So we've got something for those people too. And then at the end of the day, you know, I've been involved in selling connected controllers for, you know, more than a decade. And, you know, I've done tons and tons of these presentations and proposals, and I talk about how great the system is and how it adjusts to weather and it saves this and it does that. At the end of the day, there's just a certain element of people that all they really care about is the technology side of it. And we can speak to that as well. You know, we can give them the latest technology. Most of these control systems are, since they're online, They can get, the manufacturer can push down updates to those controllers. They'll stay as fresh as any brand new controller off the shelves. So between that, integration with home automation systems, Google Home, Alexa, those types of things, we can definitely speak to the technology guy. And this is kind of a summary of those things. So yeah, you can install Wi-Fi controllers. You can do system turn-ons and winterizations without entering the house. You don't have to hand them a bill. You can email them. These control systems for the the tree hugger in the group, person looking to save water, we have predictive watering where we can save you 35 to 50% from a base schedule. Look at that slide that Seth put up, where he showed winter water usage and then rainy day peak season water usage. And basically what he's showing you is that we have all these irrigation systems that run in the rain. Well, these smart controllers, the National Irrigation Association says that by installing any old rain sensor, on average, you can save 15% irrigation water, which is great. The issue with that is that could be stopping irrigation. That could be stopping an irrigation system from running after it has already rained in the morning. Most of these connected controllers can go out and get a weather forecast for the area for the day and make a decision to not irrigate that day ahead of rain. And if you start looking at it, 10% savings here or there are great, but 100% savings, for an entire day or multiple days during a rainy season, that's where you really start to hammer into that water usage, and that's where you start to see those 35 to 50% water savings. These are going to come from your settings, though. Most systems are customizable. So based on percentage chance of rain, we're going to either decide to shut down or not. Those should be your settings. My settings for my home controllers shut off if the percentage chance of rain is greater than 65%. You might have yours set to 85, 90%. So it has something to do with settings. Most of these smart controllers, connected controllers, offer an optional flow meter, which most contractors hear about it and they think about documenting water usage, which flow meters definitely can do. Aside from that, for the person who's fanatical about their home and even the person who's fanatical about documenting those water savings, we can also spot breaks in the system. In my own house, believe it or not, before I had Hydrowise installed here, I had a flood in my own basement as a result of an issue with an irrigation system. So flow meters are a great way to protect against a flood. So it's something else that you can go out and sell. Cover the hydraulic side. The other side with irrigation systems that you have issues with is going to be the electrical side. A lot of these controllers, our controllers, have milliamp sensors built into them. Anytime they turn on a valve, they're going to take a resistance reading along the wire path, and they can basically report when that resistance spikes, which is typically going to let you know that you've got a failing solenoid, which will stop your zone from opening up. If the resistance is 0, we could spot a broken wire, which is going to mean that same deal, you have a broken wire and your valves are not going to open up at all. So for the person who's fanatical about his landscape, they probably want to know about those settings. And people can control their irrigation through their smartphones and show it off to their neighbors. They can integrate it with Amazon Alexa and all those types of things. And that's how you speak to the technology person that you're trying to sell to. But the problem is, if you're forcing the sale, if your only angle is technology, and you may think it's funny that I bring this up, but the reality of it is, I've gotten reports on Long Island that people have called into our factory, to complain because a contractor went out and installed a Wi-Fi controller, for the person's mother who doesn't have Wi-Fi or a smartphone. So, you got to kind of figure who we're selling to and make sure that it's the right fit. And then the other side of it, Mike touched on, I'm going to touch on it a little bit later, pretty much with the same slide. But if you are, which we sell a ton of them here on Long Island and throughout the Northeast, we sell a ton of pre-nozzled heads. They're fantastic. They save you time. It's great. The issue is that what ends up happening, as Mike outlined, is you have the same nozzle in multiple heads doing different patterns, and What you did with the conventional system is you just jacked up the run times to make sure you didn't have any dry spots in your lawn. The smarter move would be to go through when you're installing a Wi-Fi controller, check out the nozzles in heads, and take a couple of minutes to go around changing some nozzles up so that your run times are correct for both heads, and that you don't end up with any of these bare spots due to the controller reducing watering times because of weather or whatever, what have you, and then seeing some imbalanced system getting exposed. And then this is one of the big ones for me, man. We sell a line of Wi-Fi controllers. Fantastic. That's the hardware side of it. Great. The backbone of our system is the app, is the control piece. And for me, I think this is a huge deal. You're hanging a Wi-Fi controller and you're moving on. Well, who's controlling this thing? As the season changes, as weather patterns change throughout the season, as you get into August and we're in thunderstorm season popping up, is anybody looking at the settings within there? Is anybody changing anything? When you spoke to the homeowner to sell it to them, did you discuss this? Who does that fall on? Is that something that you control? Is that something that they control? With our system, we have global settings that a contractor can go in, change throughout the year, throughout every week if they wanted to. They could push those settings out to all their controllers. This is something that should be discussed. Who's going to change? Who's going to take care of the settings within the controller? So upgrading smart control, be aware of your sales presentation. How is this controller going to help? How is it going to appeal to the customer? What is it going to do for them that their existing controller is not already doing? Know what you're selling. Like I said before, how is each party tied to the controller? What's their responsibilities and expectations? Who's changing programming throughout the year? Who's updating things as weather changes? And then this is something that I'm going to harp on over and over, is this garbage in, garbage out. I have contractors who I hear them explain to customers that we'll get a notification if this happens, if that happens, if this happens, we'll adjust based on weather and this and that. And then you get into their account, and yes, the system does have the ability to do that, but you don't have any of it set up. So if you're going to be out there selling controllers, if you're going to be out there selling controllers as water saving devices, you really should get in there and learn the system that you're using and learn how it works, and make sure that your settings are the best settings for that system. To me, this opens up that opportunity for customers who I constantly get asked this question about managing or monitoring controllers for people. And we're laying it out there for you. I mean, the system's there, everything's in place. It's going to involve some management on your side of things, but it's definitely doable on the backs of these types of systems. So, and does the rest of the system need work too? We just talked about this as far as balancing the nozzles and things like that. So contractors who know it well, sell it well. The guys that I talk to who sell, I'll go into their accounts and they got 1,000, 1,500 controllers on their account. They know the system inside and out. From the contractors who I meet with that do tell me that they struggle a little bit to sell these controllers. They say they're overpriced or whatever the case might be. I usually spin it around and ask them, what's the approach? What are you telling people when you're going to sell it to them? And usually it's something very, 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 very watered down, where it's like, I tell them you could turn it on with their phone and it's got a weather station. It doesn't really, to me, if I'm the consumer, that's not really answering my questions. Well, let's get another layer or two deeper. What else does it do? How does it save water? Where's the weather station? Are you installing it in my house, or what's going on? So know the system well, know how to position it right, and appeal to your customers.
And tell them the Water Authority will give them $50.
And tell them the Water Authority you give them $50. Perfect. So the next 2 or 3 slides, they may be a little corny, but I like to use these because they break it down to a really, like, the most simple understanding of smart controls and what they actually do. And so some people think that a smart controller is a Wi-Fi controller. That is not necessarily true. A Wi-Fi controller is typically a smart controller, but a smart controller doesn't have to be a Wi-Fi controller. Smart controller is basically an irrigation controller that has another device or some sort of outside input that is taking readings from on-site or getting readings from off-site regarding what's happening there, and it's making changes to a base program that's in the controller. So it's finding out that it's only 65 degrees and therefore it's taking 30% off your runtime, something like that. But it's basically taking a base program and it's getting some sort of input and it's carving down that base program to shave off unnecessary runtime. So smart controllers, they don't randomly cut back on watering. What they're really trying to do is match the watering for that landscape with what the landscape is calling for on that day. It's not a random thing. That's why historical ET, some control systems have, which is nice, saying that, March should use 50%, water because it's March, and April should use 60, and so on and so forth. Those are good, but they're not getting you where you need to be. In the Northeast, we have some crazy weather where it's flip-flopping, as you've seen between yesterday and today and last week and this. It happens throughout the season. We get a cold May, or we get a rainy spring, or whatever the case might be. These smart controllers should be taking inputs from what's going on the site and adjusting for it on that day. So with that theory in mind, how about trying to explain to your customers this? This is a graph that I pulled out of something that we had on our website. And basically what's going on is, if you look at this chart here, graph, this inside dark blue, I guess it would be called, would be your plant's watering requirements. And if you look across the bottom axis here, we're showing you months. So obviously in January, your plants are going to require the least amount of water, and sometime between July and August, they're going to require the most amount of water. Okay, so that's what your plants require. In an ideal scenario, we would only give it exactly that much water. All right. But what typically happens, again, especially in the Northeast, what on a conventional controller, or sometime around March or April, contractors go out and they go through their systems. They turn on all their customer systems. And a lot of times what they do is, because they're not getting paid to be back there every week or every month, sometime around March or April, they go through the system and they turn their programming, they set their programming to cover them when the system, during the peak months of the system, so July or August. So March or April, they go out, they set their controller runtime so that they're covered in July and August, and they're good. And then sometime September, October, November, they go out, they winterize the season, they shut the controller off, and that's what this orange line represents. So the issue is that, when you're out there and you're turning your control systems on and you're setting up your programming so you're covered in the peak, you have all these early months, this early irrigation season. That's what this light blue represents. The early half of the season and the late half of the season, all this light blue is fat. And what smart controllers can do is trim the fat. They can take into consideration what the temperatures are and reduce the run times down. They can take into consideration rainfall that has fallen and make adjustments to schedules for that. And that's where you start to see your water savings. So my feeling is I could sell these controllers with, if I printed that thing out and just showed that to a customer, I can give them that example and go through it. Maybe that'll help. But so you sold a controller, now what? So the first thing that typically happens when you start using smart controllers is that your watering times that you're used to are probably going to be reduced. All right. They're going to be reduced for all those factors that I just outlined. And so that's something that you need to have in mind. We are trained to think 1 inch of water per week, roughly. That's kind of what we say, inch and a quarter, depending on, I guess, the turf or the type of grass that people have on their property. But it's kind of a rule of thumb. But you also have to think about, well, what happens, like I said, earlier on in the season, later on in the season, when it's a little cooler, maybe on different zones, you've got shade, or, factoring in rainy or seasonal temperatures. These are all things that are going to impact what your scheduling should represent. So when you set a smart controller correctly, you're going to bring in the current weather data or sensor input, and you're going to be trying to match your watering times to what your landscape needs for that day. And Mike used this example before when he was talking about a snowblower example, talking about matching precipitation rates and addressing the spot and not the time. In our training, that's something that we talk about a lot. And what is the easiest thing to do, you know, when you get called, not when you're turning the system on for the season, you know, not when you're turning the system off for the season, but either you're there to do a checkup, you got called to do some sort of maintenance, or maybe you got called literally because they said, well, we have a burnt spot in our backyard. What most people typically do is they just jack the time up on the controller, which is going to be the quickest and easiest way for you to get off that job site. And if that is if it truly is a burnt spot where there isn't enough water getting into, it will address the issue. It's not really addressing the issue the correct way, because you're going to be adding additional water to landscape that doesn't need it. It's not burnt up. And really what you could be doing is fixing that whole scenario by just changing the nozzle that's in the head. That area that's not getting enough water, you increase the nozzle on that head. Maybe you decrease the nozzle in another area. But so address the spot, not the time. It's a real quick and easy way to save water versus just increasing the time and actually adding to the problem. So, you know, I imagine everybody's system has something like this. This is just the kind of inner workings of the system that we sell. The nice thing about our system, again, you know, I position ours as a contractor controller mainly for this reason. I'm not telling you every time you go and hang a controller for a new customer that you have to go in and start creating settings for that individual customer. I know I keep saying it that way because that's really what needs to happen. But you'd like to think that the system that you're using you'd be able to make some default settings on your account. So with our system, the contractor piece of it, for contractors, they can go in and they can look at their watering, we call them triggers, but they're watering adjustments. And they can customize these, okay, so that their account is set up the way they want it. So if that's in mind now, you're going to set these adjustment factors to the settings the way you want them so that they apply to your customers' controllers in your region and they're responding the way that you want them. It's doing a few things for you. It's making you more efficient, first of all, and what I mean by that is, again, like I said before, if you have to hang a controller tomorrow for Mr. Lewis, you're not going to Mr. Lewis's house and going through every setting that he has on his account and updating them. That would be very time consuming. So we're going to say, hey, listen, spend a little bit of time in the background of your whatever system that you're using, learn it a bit, understand how it adjusts, look into the settings, and get those things set up the way that you want them to adjust for your customers. When you have those settings the way you want them, hopefully your system has these types of things. Those settings are going to be baked into every controller that you want to hang up. And if you look at ours, I could go through here and change these daily if I wanted to, which is really a little bit of overkill. But I do have contractors who adjust these on a weekly basis as the season moves on, and we do enter into some different portions of the season. They'll adjust them for their customers. They'll make some tweaks here, and then they'll reapply these settings to all the controllers that they have on their account. This is what some people get paid for doing specifically that, but it's also wringing out as much water savings as you could possibly have for a system. So our settings, we have a floor temperature that the system won't come on unless the high for the day is exceeded. So if you think about that graph that I showed before with the water usage and the peak usage being in July, well, remember those two corners that I said those are a waste? Well, we have a setting that could say that if the high for the day isn't over a certain temperature, don't even water. So instead of being on cruise control March, April, May, every single day before it runs, it's going to look and get a weather forecast for this property at this address and see, is the high for the day going to at least exceed whatever you want it to be? In my example, it's 60 degrees. If it is, that's great, we'll water. If it's not, we won't. And now think about, we've gone in the last couple of days from 19 degrees to 40 degrees to it jumps all around daily. Every single day, your controller will go out and get a temperature high for the day, and it's going to make a decision whether to even run or not based on if that thing is exceeded or not. So if you're smart, you take a feature like this and you learn that, just like I explained it to you, you can explain it to a homeowner. And if you're pretty good at your job, you can do some kind of quick spitball math and you've got 10 zones of irrigation here. You're using on average, 10 gallons per minute. The system runs for 200 minutes. That's 2,000 gallons of water that you're saving every time we decide to not turn the system on. So if we did that, 10 times a year, that's 20,000 gallons of water we could save you that your landscape didn't really need. So those are some really easy ways to save money, save water and money early on and later on in the year. Well, at 62 degrees, do you need the full irrigation cycle that you do when it's 95 degrees? No, you don't. No, you don't. So you can choose, if you'd like to, temperature thresholds that you can automatically adjust down by whatever percentage that you choose, so that you can save X amount of water that way. And so our settings, we could turn off based on a temperature threshold. We could adjust down. We could adjust up. We could turn off based on a percentage chance of rain. Okay, this is what I was talking about before. So at 65% chance of rain, anything over 65% chance of rain, I'm going to shut my system off. And that is also, like I said before, it's the same savings as shutting off when the temperature threshold hasn't been met. You could be saving thousands of gallons every time it happens. So that's, we put on our website that we save, up to 50% water. That's where we really start to see those savings, when we're shutting down full irrigation cycles. We also have a place for a setting that mimics a rain sensor. So it's a 24-hour look back on rainfall that has actually fallen, not a forecast. This is rainfall that's actually fallen. And then we have a cumulative look back for X amount of days and X amount of rainfall. So if you've gotten a certain amount, this says 2 inches over 3 days. It's a constant 3-day look back. You're not going to irrigate until you've dried out for 3 days. So my point is, know these settings, these cell controllers, and set them correctly and get the most out of your water savings. And so this is what I was talking about before: match precipitation rate and addressing the spot, not the time. The easiest thing for me to do when I show up and I see a brown spot is to jack that time up through the app or through the controller. You're not really doing anybody any favors by doing that. It's the quickest means to get off the property. I understand that at times. You could take another couple of minutes. We give nozzles out for free for the most part. If you need to change a nozzle or two, it's a really easy swap. It might just take you a couple of minutes worth of figuring out what's where and what needs to be replaced. But instead of jacking up the time, wasting more water in all those plush green areas that don't need more water, go ahead and make some changes to the system.
Kevin?
Yes.
Those numbers, where are they located? Can you find them in like the card that comes with the case?
Numbers as far as
so you can figure out which nozzle to change up and how to do it?
They're everywhere. We put them all over our website. We have them in our catalogs. We include them in cases of heads. You can, if anybody needs them, you can call me. I'll get you them.
I just wanted to let them know where to get the info.
Yeah, great. Yeah. And so, that rule of thumb, hey, inch of water per week, we do have a lot of rules of thumb for irrigation pertaining to precipitation rates. Sometimes what's installed and the way it's installed, you can't assume those precipitation rates. So this is where you get back into, well, what's in the head? You know what I mean? So we have rules of thumb that you can generally use, especially if you're installing. But when you're working on a system that exists already, you really kind of got to roll up your sleeves and see what's there in order for you to install it correctly, where you are matching precipitation rates. And this is basically, Mike's snowblower example. This is it. It's the same concept. And listen, I'm out there talking to contractors. This is somebody else's slide, if I'm going to be honest with everybody. And they put this on here, and I thought it was a really good statement to make, is that match precipitation is probably the most ignored concept. And then it gets exploited at times when you're installing smart irrigation systems, because we're going to reduce that time. And those areas that aren't getting enough water because they weren't nozzled correctly are going to show it. So Mike covered this pretty well, but if you broke a circle into quarters and you gave each one an assignment of a gallon per minute, 4 gallons per minute should be your full circle, and you adjust down. Obviously, that could change based on the supply of the system. If you got an 8 gallon a minute supply, you might not be using a 4 gallon a minute nozzle on a full circle, but the concept still remains the same. Nozzle them correctly. You could still buy pre-nozzled heads. Maybe you buy, for every case of, 2 cases of pre-nozzled heads or 3 cases of pre-nozzled heads, you buy a case that doesn't have them. That's what you use for your full circles and maybe your quarters, or however you want to do it. I understand around here we have a shortened season. We're threatened by the weather. We have a ton of things that impact our ability to turn a profit, labor being one of them. So time is money, and I do understand why we sell so many pre-nozzled heads, but there is a better way to do things. So we talked about this also. I mentioned this before when I was talking about a couple of the different categories of people that we're selling to at this point, right? So many smart controllers systems that you'll buy into can do more than just reach remotely, change programming, do all those things. They're really, what I think as a contractor, I think the biggest concept or the biggest piece that I'd be buying into would be the fact that I'd want to know what's going on a job site when I'm not there. I think probably most contractors on this call have at one point or another had somebody come up to them and say to them, hey, why is it every spring when you come here, I get hit with a bill to change all these components of my system? And hopefully you're able to explain to them. You say, well, listen, it's a cycle. It's an unending cycle. And what happens, I'll explain it to you. You call us, you come here, you call us to come here to open your irrigation system for the beginning of the season. We got a whole bunch of customers. We come as early as we can. We go through your system. We see components that are broken, a head that's broken here, a spray head that maybe was knocked over there. And we go through and we fix all these components that needed to be fixed. We update the programming in the controller. We get you all set, all ready for the irrigation season ahead. We leave you with a bill, and then we move on and wait to hear from you again. Now, we're waiting to hear from you to hear that you've got a problem on your system, and then we'll come back and we'll do some service work for you. If we don't hear from you, and the next time we hear from you is when we send out those mailers just letting you know that it's winterization season, starts the cycle again. We come out, we have a whole bunch of customers that we have to winterize. We go to your house. The difference being in the winter, we have all those customers to get through, freezing weather's right around the corner. What we don't keep on our truck during winterization season, and I've said this in front of thousands of contractors over the year, there's very few people who actually argue with me on this point. Most contractors, when they're doing winterizations, they don't carry, products. They don't carry heads. They don't have fittings. Their trucks are stripped down so that they can do the winterizations, move on to the next one, bill it out, move on to the next one. A lot of times we'll make a note, head in the corner of the yard was cracked, this was broken, that, and then we come back in the spring and that starts the cycle again. So let me ask you, Mr. Homeowner, all this stuff that I identified, we were here October 15th to do your winterization. Did these issues, that broken head over there and that crack in the pipe over there, did they all happen on, October 10th and 11th and 12th? They didn't. They happened all season long. I was here in March. They happened in April and May and June and July. And guess what happened? Your system ran inefficiently as a result of it. That head that was cracked on a riser in the back of your property that's laying next to it, that thing runs at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was shooting a geyser up straight into the air for 20 minutes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. What that means is you wasted a ton of water back there. It also means that the rest of that zone didn't irrigate efficiently. And, we didn't know about it, so we had no reason to come, and you don't see it because it runs at 4 o'clock in the morning. So what we can do is we can install a system where we can be finding out about these things as they happen. Okay. I could find out if I install a flow meter, I could find out when the zone is running at 25% higher than it was last time it ran, which would signify that there's some sort of a leak or something broken. Aside from that, I could find out when there's water running through that flow meter when the system shouldn't be on, representing like a major problem, a broken main line, a hung valve, something pretty bad. I could detect that. I can get an alert to my phone, and I can notify you of these problems. And this way, it's not waiting till the end of the year or possibly, causing damage to your house like I had happen to mine. So we've got some great things on the electrical side. I mentioned it before. I could tell you when you have a solenoid that's about to fail or has failed. What that means is I don't have to wait till it plays out in your landscape. You're not paying attention. And, the hot months of July, 2 or 3 weeks, that whole left side of your property didn't get any irrigation because you had a bad solenoid. As soon as that happens, the very next time it goes to run, I can find out about that. And I could find out if you're, somebody, the landscaper that came in behind me cut the wire to your valves. That zone's never going to run if you have a broken wire. And I could find out if there's a lost connection to the controller, which could signify just like an issue with Wi-Fi, at which point the controller would continue to run. It could also signify that somebody's unplugged your controller, at which point it will not continue to run. So if you have another trade over and they're working in the cabana or they're working in the garage or whatever the case might be, they unplug your controller, they plug in their drill or whatever they have with them, and they forget to plug back in your controller, I'll know about it the next day that it goes to run. So these are all cool things that you can be turning to your customers, and these are added features that you can sell them. You wouldn't know about these if you never rolled up your sleeves and got into the capabilities of what your system does. Again, for our system, hopefully for most of the systems that are out there, you go in and you set these up once in your account, and they're just built in. All these settings will apply every controller that you want to, every new one that you want to set up. If you wanted to make it an alert specific to one customer on our system, you can. We can make it to only one controller or apply to all controllers and all customers. So, and that's again, we sell a flow meter on our system. I think some of the other companies do. Flow meters, again, a lot of times when I bring them up to contractors, they're like, water's so cheap, we don't need it. You're missing the point. You're missing the point. You're taking a lot of the capabilities out from a really smart system by not having that thing in place. Does that flow meter make it a smart controller? No. The flow meter is not adjusting run times or anything like that. It will identify a break and pull a zone out of the program. It will notify you if you got a major break and you could shut your system off. But other than that, the flow meter doesn't have anything to do with making the system smart. It is just an added feature that, honestly, positioned the right way, people are interested in. And so these flow meters are fairly inexpensive. Ours are anyhow. If you're installing a new system, it's pretty easy to actually install. Installing one on an existing system can be a little bit more difficult. We just launched a wireless flow meter, so that should kind of help out. You don't have to get a wire back to the controller if you don't want to. But if you haven't checked it out, it's probably something that you want to offer, and offer it as an option. And I think you'd be surprised. I mean, if you're, I don't know if anybody here works in New York City, but most new projects that are going up in New York City, they require flood sensors and basements and flow meters on all different aspects of people's houses. So it's something to be aware of, to know about, and something to offer. Aside from all of the things that we identified here, what other components do we have that you can offer your customers to make their system much more efficient? So the big ones for us, and I have lead credentials myself. If you've ever looked at a lead project, and you've looked at the irrigation component of any sort of lead project, what they really want to see is they want pressure regulation everywhere. They love flow meters. They love pressure regulation all over the place. They love check valves. They love high efficiency stuff. They love drip. They love all these types of things. Why do they love it? Because it does a better job of putting down the right amount of water at the right pace. The pressure regulated components is something that it is becoming a mandate in more and more states. It just actually, for calendar year 2022, it has been mandated for the state of Massachusetts. So in our, drive this winter to get everybody to sign their programs and everything, we had to go to all of our distributors and basically say, you have to acknowledge that you've signed this. You're not supposed to be selling non-pressure regulated spray heads to contractors anymore for projects that are going to be installed in Massachusetts. To this point, it's been like a West Coast thing, and it's kind of coming around. It's going to be here before you know it. It'll probably be in Connecticut and New Jersey before New York, but it's probably coming. Why is that such a big deal? Because if you've ever looked in a catalog and you've looked at a spray nozzle or an MP rotator or high efficiency nozzle, we recommend, or even a rotor, we recommend running those heads at a certain pressure. Why do we do that? Well, because I don't know if you've ever been to a factory, you've seen there are rooms that they have at factories with catchment cans in what would be a typical spray pattern, and those catchment cans are catching droplets of water, and they run different heads with different nozzles, and they test them. They test them for efficiency of delivering the water where it's supposed to be delivered at different pressures. And what you see is as you increase pressure, you'll see that the flow rate in a lot of these heads increases. So now you're using more water, and then you're finding out that the water that you want to be delivering in a certain pattern, half circle, 30 feet, is not getting delivered where it needs to be. And this all goes back to applying that water at too high of a pressure. So that's why there's such a big push for pressure regulation throughout an irrigation system. And there's a bunch of different places that you can install them. You can install them with a valve. You can install them on a main to reduce pressure down. You can install them on a valve to reduce pressure for an entire zone of irrigation. And then you can install them in sprays and rotary heads. Another big piece is going to be check valves. We sell heads that have check valves installed in them. We sell them where you can field install them on the bottom of rotary heads, field install them on the bottom of spray heads. We sell drip that has pre-emitted drip that has emitters in there that have check valves or not. I forget what I think it's a gallon for every 50 feet of drip, I think is the number that remains in a line that on non-check drip is just going to drain out of those emitters when your system shuts down and the valve shuts off. So there's little pieces here and there where you can chip away at some overwatering. And then the high efficiency or rotary nozzles, I think most manufacturers make them. They're just better. If you see their results on our test stands, they are so much more efficient than spray nozzles or rotary nozzles. They apply water much more slowly. You don't see the runoff that you see with some other types of heads. So we're going to go through a few of these guys. Pressure regulated rotors, we have them. I think most manufacturers have them. Different manufacturers do them differently. We put ours in the body of the rotor. Some people put them in the stem of the rotor. We sell a 3/4 by 3/4 female by male inline pressure regulator. And so you could buy those where you keep a box of them on the truck and you use them where you need to use them. But bottom line is that those pressure regulated or these pressure regulated rotors are going to dial into the proper pressure for a rotary head. So you can have your system running at way higher pressures than you should at the head. You could kind of leave it running through your valve. You could put less emphasis and focus on balancing out the zone, the way you're laying out your laterals and where you're placing your heads and things. And you could have these pressure regulated rotors just kind of clean up all that work for you. When the water's delivered to that head, pressure regulator is going to kick in, and we're going to make sure that the water coming out of there is at the right pressure, thus delivering it more efficiently to where we want to land that water in the landscape. And hopefully we got a quick, I think it's 20-second or so video that might kick in right here. Told you it was quick. Yeah, quick and easy video. I think some of us, myself included, kind of initially thought the pressure regulation thing was a bit of a joke. You start to see it in front of you with two different heads running at different pressures, and you got to admit there's a difference. And you know, we're moving on to spray heads, and you'll notice I said spray heads. A lot of us, myself included, grew up in the industry calling these things mist heads, and you hear it slip out from people all the time. Mist head is bad terminology. You don't want this thing to be misting. You want them to be spraying. Misting means that the water is being delivered at too high of a pressure and it's misting. And as you saw in that video, especially you get into any sort of wind and that mist just starts getting carried away. So whether it's a rotary head or a spray head, you want to dial in that pressure to be running at the proper PSI for optimal results for whatever product that you're using. We make our spray heads with in two different, we make them just regular black with no pressure regulation. And then we add a PRS 30 and a PRS 40 for regular spray nozzles and for our NP rotator, which you'll see right here, which is the 40 PSI. Spray heads run optimally at about 30 PSI, spray nozzles. MPs or rotary nozzles, the Rainbird option, I think we anyhow recommend 40 PSI, a little bit more pressure. If you've ever seen an MP rotator run, you'll see they got those thicker streams of water. And why they have those and what makes them so efficient is those streams of water cut through wind and elements better. And they do a better job of delivering that water where it needs to be. So pressure regulated sprays is a big deal. This thing's got a check valve and pressure regulation built into it. The check valve is field or factory installed. Again, if you got a low head, if you got a slope or a hill on a property, any of those low heads without the check valve, they're going to take all that water from that whole lateral line and just drain out through that low head. So if you use ours, use Rainbird, whoever sprays you use, do yourself a favor, pick up a box at the beginning of the season of check valves and use those where applicable. So you don't see that stream of water running down the street.
Also, Kevin, if I may?
Yes, please.
You also don't hear all that hissing every time the zone comes back on. So your zone is going right to efficiency faster than waiting that other minute and a half to refill everything up before it starts running. It's
a real good point that applies for drip, sprays, rotors, whatever the case might be. You know, I mean, some people like hearing the whistling and drip. You know, so they know it's on, but that's a real good point. It's going to keep the water in the system, in the lateral pipe, and be charged for the next time it's set to go. So here's an example of think of that video that I just showed with the two rotary heads running at two different PSIs. That's exactly what this little chart is trying to show you. Forget this side over here. We're showing it in bar instead of PSI, so forget this whole thing. So this is basically taking a zone of spray heads with 10 heads, so 10 nozzles of 15-foot whatever, halves, whatever they are. 15-foot nozzles, 10 of them. One of the zones is going to run at 30 PSI. The other one's going to run at 50 PSI. They're going to run for 10 minutes. the flow that you'll notice on the lower PSI, the 30 PSI zone, is only going to be 1.9 gallons per minute, where the flow on the greater zone is going to be 2.7 gallons per minute. Doesn't seem like a huge deal when you start to look at it. When you multiply it out by the nozzles, by the minutes, by the amount of times per year, you're talking about a really big savings. So this is one zone of irrigation just by getting your system to run at the correct pressure, where the heads are supposed to be, where the heads are meeting each other or laid out the way they're supposed to be. Everything's getting exactly what it's designed to get, except you're saving almost 10,000 gallons of water over the course of a year, or about a 30% reduction. Again, this is just by dialing in the pressure to get it where it should be anyhow. You see that big of a reduction. So that's one example. And, EPA has given the WaterSense label to us for our pressure regulated heads. They have signed off on our claims of 30% water savings over a non-pressure regulated head on average. So it's something for you to look into. If you're not using them yet, just a matter of time until you're going to be forced to use them. There is an increase in price to buy a pressure regulated head. If you understand the concepts and the theories that I just laid out, you don't think you could sell those upgrades to your homeowners if you're able to express that in a good way? I think you are. So it's going to be an upfront cost, but a long-term savings.
You also have a longer warranty on those.
Oh, there you go. Good call. And we talked about check valves. Again, this applies to sprays and rotary heads. We sell cases of heads that have check valves in them. Some people buy them and install them in every single head. Not going to hurt you for the most part. Go ahead and do that if you'd like, or you can use them sparingly where you see fit. Wherever you see that slope, wherever that low head is going to be, go ahead and install a check valve in there. Think about it. You're not saving the water that's sitting in this swing joint here. You're saving all the water that's in this lateral pipe that's ultimately going to run downhill in the piping system to that low head and just drain out. So don't think of it as just saving a little bit of water here. You're saving every bit of water that's in that lateral pipe. High efficiency spray or rotary nozzles, whatever you want to call them. We call them MP rotators. So we're talking about a higher uniformity. So if you look at one spray nozzle running at 2 gallons per minute for 10 minutes, 20 gallons total used, look at an MP in that same scenario. You have one MP rotator running at half a gallon per minute. You could run it for longer, thus giving the water more time to get into the pores and giving water more time to move around in the soil and not run off. And it's going to use less water to deliver the same amount of irrigation. And if you're really good, you're thinking about using these products ahead of time. The issue that we get is most of the time when I speak with people, they're saying, I'd like to make the system more efficient. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to install rotary nozzles into an existing irrigation system, and we're going to gain efficiencies like that. And that's great. You're going to save water using those nozzles. That's cool, but that's kind of like what's in it for them. Now you've got to go out and you've got to sell a more expensive product, and you've got to kind of try to tie it to that water savings that they're going to experience, which is fine. If you're planning ahead and you're designing with MPs, it kind of changes the whole thing for you. Where you're stuck with certain distances of your spray nozzles, we go down to 4 feet or 6 feet, and we go all the way up to whatever we go up to. Our range on MPs go down to like an 800. I think we'll get down to 6 feet, and then we have 3500s, which obviously go to I think 39 feet. I think we put in our catalog, 30 to 39 feet. So when installed correctly, those MP rotators, MPR, will match precipitation rates. So installed correctly, with the right product chosen at the right spacing, because applying it so much lower at a lower rate. For that reason, we can get away with using fewer zones. So if you look at this system, we did a few things over here on the right side. This is using traditional sprays. They spaced them out tighter. There's more zones. They had to design kind of on top of each other. On the MP side, it's almost like using rotors, but you can dial them in and match them better. So way fewer zones. Yes, an MP rotator is going to cost you more money than a regular spray nozzle, but it's way more flexible and way more efficient. So use that efficiency to your benefit. Use the fact that we've got a 10 gallon per minute system. Well, I'm not using a gallon and a half in one nozzle. I'm using a half. So you can get away with installing a different system, even though you're going to be using spray heads. So it's definitely something to consider. Everybody looks at the cost of a rotary nozzle and says, well, I could put in the same head, I could put a different nozzle in for a fraction of the price. You're correct, but you're not seeing the bigger picture. If you're upfront designing with MPs, it changes the whole thing. So that is definitely something to consider. And here, I think we kind of spell it out for you a little bit differently. Look, this is probably data that's a couple of years old. This is probably stuff, that maybe we put out for, a West Coast property or whatever. But the theory remains the same. You can design that same spray system using 6 valves with 2. It means you could use fewer spray heads and fewer MPs than you would over here. It means you could use up not only just fewer valves, but fewer stations on a controller, whether that's modules or whatever it might be. You could also use less pipe and less wire. So don't just look at the cost of a simple spray nozzle and compare it to a rotary nozzle. Look at the big picture. See if maybe you could change the way you design. And so that right out of the gate, you're designing differently and you're designing more efficiently. Don't just get scared away by that price tag. And then the last kind of piece that I have for you today is, if you didn't want to get down to those details of getting into making sure the pressure is correct at the zone at the head level, whether it's with a rotary or a spray head, we make these. I'm not sure about everybody else, but we make what we call an AccuSync. And so if you buy any one of our valves, and you take the solenoid, unthread the solenoid from the valve piece, you can thread in an AccuSync in between the solenoid and the valve. We have these things where they come at certain pressures. So you could buy it set to a certain pressure, or you can buy them where you can customize them and set to whatever pressure that you want. So it's kind of nice that, they would be adjustable, and you could tweak that settings by, how your system's built out. Maybe you have a huge, a lot of piping on the lateral side of your zone valve. That adjustable AccuSync might be the way to go. Instead of dealing with every single head that's out there and paying for that, maybe you keep these on the truck and you use them in certain scenarios where your pressure's high or the zone's built out a little funky. So it is an option for you to use at the zone level too. So I believe that is that's all I have for you for today. I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the the opportunity to get in front of you guys and speak. I would be happy to meet with anybody to discuss these any further. If anybody wanted to find out more about pressure regulation or more about any of the products that we sold, or talk about digging into the back end of the control system, getting their settings correct, let me know.
You have anybody on chat there, Seth?
Nope. It doesn't look like anybody has any more questions. If you do have a question, either just unmute and feel free to ask, or type it in the chat. This presentation was recorded, and obviously we could send out these slides to anyone who requests them, so not a problem.
Hey, Kevin?
Yeah.
How you doing, Kevin?
How you doing, man?
Good. One thing I wanted to bring up that you kind of missed on with the flow meters is basically a lot of Long Islanders who have sewer systems. They were paying for sewers. That like tallies right along with the water usage from what we use on our water bills. Just the flow meter in itself will save them the cost of the flow meters, depending on the property, on their sewer usage. So it's another great selling point.
I have been approached by people who install in different areas of my territory asking about using our flow meter as a deduct meter for the sewer portion of the tax. I've had it approved in certain areas, but I don't know how, I don't know what that process would be here. I don't know, Seth, do you know?
No, we don't really deal with that too much here.
Bobby, I remember you had an incident when you first were using a flow meter with a dock system and getting alerts.
Oh yeah, well yeah, the client had it tied into his dock water as well. Yeah.
You ended up getting alerts when he was using his dock because it was registering that water also. It wasn't on a separate line.
Correct.
So that is as I go around my territory, different little micro regions kind of install differently. That's usually whenever I start talking in a training class about flow meters, that's like one of the first things that comes up. We can't use those. We have hose bibs built into our main lines. It's a charge main. You can still use them. The difference is going to be in those settings that we talked about with the alerts. Just you got to get in there and build those alerts where it will allow for some, on a system that has a charge main, maybe they have a hose bib, maybe they have a pool fill, maybe they have a dock line. You'd build in some settings into that system, which would allow for some usage without getting, constant alerts. And I would kind of notify you that, hey, Joe is probably using his dock hose bib as opposed to there being a leak on the irrigation system. So that there definitely are ways to program around it and create settings where, you shouldn't be getting too many false alerts when things happen.
In particular, most people aren't going to have a mainline leak at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for exactly 50, 60 gallons a minute. So that's kind of like, where you're going to learn a little learning curve, but you're going to kind of figure that out because I've had that too. And you just have to let them know and create the space, like you said, on there for the thing, and the Hydrowise are excellent. And you went over the triggers just for my own personal pain. Just remember the wind, the wind sensors, the wind settings, for the miles per hour for wind, because I thought I was being Mr. Efficient and setting them at 15 miles per hour. And then, you have 4 days of wind, then somebody's drip system didn't go off. So just, I'm sure you guys, everybody on the call here, I'm sure kind of knows that, but.
Yeah, when I do those trainings, I typically tell people to not use that setting. It works it kind of contradicts ET.
Yes. I
So.
went through this, the thing with the flow sensors too is an excellent point that Bobby brought up was for the sewer rates. So, consumption, whatever crosses your meter, you're being looked at as far as it's going down the drain. And I guess depending on different areas of where you operate. For me, I brought that up 4 or 5 years ago when the stuff first came out with Water Authority. It doesn't matter who, but they basically told me to shut up very quickly about it because it was a nightmare. And I get it for Suffolk, it would be too, as to like, hey, great, we want to incorporate that, but how do you know what's real and what's not? So maybe something to look into. But as I sit here and waste your time, so to speak, with everybody involved here, so you have some very educated, very well seasoned, experienced irrigators, I'll call them, not just sprinkler guys. We're irrigators. We know soil intrusion rates, ET, evapotranspher, that's a concept that, and I'm not being cocky, I don't know everything, far from it. The minute you think you do, you're in trouble, I think. But anyway, how that relates to scheduling and everything else. And Kevin, you did a really good job as far as, what the Hydrowise, which is an excellent product, will be able to, how you can kind of dial that in. Another place you can get in trouble, by the way, been there, done that. So watch that on the trigger. But I kind of feel, and maybe I'm wrong, that we're all pulling on the same piece of steak. What do I mean by that? Is that the water authority, nothing again, I don't mean it badly. You want to reduce consumption because your pumping costs and your commitments are big. Hunter does an unbelievable job on product and education, probably the best in the industry, I would say, from my standpoint.
Can't argue
No,
with that.
no doubt about it. And it costs you guys a fortune. Nobody's paying you to do those websites and put all that stuff together, and the education and just the sheer talent, I would say, to put it bluntly, that you have. All right. And I do use other products, so don't get pissed. But anyway, it is what it is. But anyway, they're excellent at it. Now we come down to the Irrigation Association and the contractors and where everybody fits in. Well, it was interesting a few years ago. It doesn't matter where it was, but it was in New York, nowhere in anybody's territory that we're speaking with now. But I was at a meeting where they were admonishing and going after a water authority to reduce their water rates, but everybody primarily pulled from a well. So the water authority had meters, so they could be basically scrutinized and say, hey, we expect you to save this much water, where meanwhile, better than half the other side was all out of wells. So I had to stand up, Joe Contractor here, and get in front of them and say, well, you're letting better than half the people using water are completely unmeasured, but we're all sucking out of the same pond, so to speak. So you're sitting there admonishing the water authority, telling them, you better do this, you better do that. Meanwhile, I could go through a system in the house and pull 20, 30, 40, 50 gallons a minute, as big as a pump that I want to put in there. And it's basically free water minus the well and the electricity. But we're missing the resource. So that was an S storm. But basically, they were going to shut down outdoor watering in 7 days before that conversation took place. And I was just like, listen. And then there was another, but Kevin, you do Connecticut?
Yep.
Okay. So Connecticut was going to shut down water, and you know what happened up there with the efficiencies and everything else. So basically, just a quick thought for whatever it's worth from where it's coming from. The Water Authority, you want to save water, right? Yep. Hunter and other manufacturers have to sell product, and then contractors for us, we want to put in and reduce water and do all the right things for the resource, for it's our livelihood. So how do we best work together? Because what I started with is, it seems we're, from my perspective, for what it's worth, we're pulling on the same piece of steak. Not in a bad way. I don't mean that. Nobody's the bad guy here. But how do we work together? So could the Water Authority Suffolk, how many people are doing irrigation? And I'm not picking on you. Please don't take it that way. I'm not, because there's not many. I don't know too many places outside of licensed states or areas that can answer this. How many people are doing irrigation professionally in Suffolk County? You don't know. I'll give you the answer. Yeah. Correct. I'm not going to put you on the spot. Okay. Number two, how many backflows do you have that are installed that are proper and tested? Don't know. That's a huge risk there. Okay. So maybe there's a way that Water Authority can get with Hunter, or I shouldn't say that, or somebody like Hunter, whatever, and say, you got a program where, hey, we've got a thing with these pressure regulated heads, right? And we have certified individuals that maybe, because you said you piqued my interest a little bit with this Waterwise thing. Who's looking at the irrigation? See, that's where our part of the state comes in. For me, and I don't work in Suffolk, it doesn't matter, but I'm just saying, how does the contractor benefit and help you? And the same thing, somebody who already knows how to use all this stuff properly, the tools, the pressure regulated heads, and how to service and do all these other things. You know what I mean? Maybe there's something that can come about that way, just as an open idea. So basically, you have the clients, you want to do all these things, you don't know who's doing it, so make them come to you. Hey, Suffolk's got a program, with the IANY or whatever, something like that, where you have certified, Mike's a CIC, Bobby's certified. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This takes it takes a big investment and a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience, really, through the years, that we want to basically disseminate as good irrigators and stewards, if you will. You know what I mean? And how do you get people, how you get people to come to you. You know what I mean? You're spending all this time and putting it out there in the effort. Anybody can tell me to shut up at any time too, by the way, because I can get a little long.
Jim, we can never do that to you. You
no,
know
yeah, you could and should. But what I'm saying is everybody's going a different, everybody has the same interests, so to speak.
Yeah.
But we're going about it in a different way, which is what struck me. You know what I mean? So here we have talent. Water Authority has the customers. Hunter has the products. I've already sung their praises, which justly so. How do we put that together? Is there a program that maybe you could look into with the Water Authority? You're sending it out to your customers where you get some certified contractors in there and have these guys go out. Hey, these are the dudes. These are the guys. These are the people we want to be using. And then you're going to start to know who the hell's doing what, and give the incentive to the contractors to get the education and do the right thing. And maybe Hunter could give an extra % off. I'm not being a smart ass, Kevin. Some kind of program, you know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Where, hey, boom, it is into this thing, because we're into a world of the web where it's everywhere. You know what I mean? I got certified on the Hydrowise because I wanted to, had to. There's a lot to offer there. And I did 2 other products just because that's what's out there. But trying to get people to disseminate, what's the best for them, it's really like a trust issue. And it's not like a trust issue. It's basically, what vets you. But it just, that one meeting really struck me where I sat back and I was like, the one area I was in, they had no permitting for irrigation. They had no backflow requirements. They had, it was the wild, that's what I live with up here too, by the way. But it's like the Wild West. And it's amazing to me because we're all kind of like sniffing around this thing, but how do we work? How do we fit together in the best way?
Yeah.
So maybe something like that where, Suffolk County Water Authority, I'm not picking on you. Please don't take it that way. But you have a thing where, hey, we've got people come in, Kevin Lewis, the IANY does a thing where, hey, you're IA certified, this is who we're gonna put out there. I don't know how that falls into your ears, but that's just what struck me.
Yeah. So just so you're aware, Jim. So in terms of the backflow, I'm pretty sure all of our customers are required to have a device like that, a backflow device, a prevention
On
device.
your water meters.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
put
that's
meters
what
now.
You remove the testing on residential backflows back in the 80s or 90s or something like that. It used to be required, but it's no longer required. One thing I would like to see the water companies do, or because customers believe what they read, and it was always a big thing. And I'm not a big believer in watering longer, less often. There's a big argument with that, but people turn around to me and always say, well, I've read this, your water company wants me to water, longer period of time, less often, which actually runs into a lot of runoff, which probably isn't like the best thing to advise. And also, as far as, we have this thing called, watering different times and different stages, which actually, cycle and soak, which is, hasn't really been a big thing in the general public that often. But the one thing I would like to see from the water companies is when you say consult your irrigation contractor, it's a simple thing to where it gives us a lot more clout, and it's not putting people going to the wrong direction, because there is so many irrigation professionals, I would call them, or contractors or people installing irrigation, that people would believe you're steering them in the direction of asking somebody who really may or may not be qualified to adjust their system. If you use the words consult a certified irrigation contractor to best suit your water needs or scheduling or something of that nature, I think that goes a long way with people seeking out certified professionals. And You know, there's some people that aren't certified that are good. They just don't have the credentials, and they don't have the need to get the credentials. But if they feel they have the need to get the credentials, or people who are uneducated or uncertified, this gives them a reason to get certified. And if we're all certified and more people are certified, the more savings we can have, you know, with the water.
Yep. So whenever we do one of those Waterwise checkups, we do tell people to consult a certified irrigation professional. That is part of it. We give them actually a little, I don't have it in front of me, but we give them a little slip of paper which actually has like a URL on it where they can find a certified professional. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so just to answer Jim's question from before really quick about the checkups. So when we do it, when we go in and we talk to people about water conservation in their home, and we say, can I take a look at your, you know, your timer? We're looking at this as a total layman, obviously, right? Which I think was a lot of Jim's point, and maybe increasing these partnerships. So we're telling people, you know, hey, you know, turn it on for a second. I see you're watering a lot of sidewalk, or oh, I see you're watering every day. Have you considered every other day? It's very basic for us because we're not irrigation experts, obviously. Legally speaking, I don't think we could partner with, you know, Rainbird or with Hunter or you know, or Scott's or whoever. We couldn't have a partnership like that at the Water Authority. However, I don't think it would be a problem to have a partnership with the Irrigation Association of New York, where maybe they're going along with us on checkups, or there's a certified professional on the appointment with us, something like that. I think we could look into. Yeah, I'm not against that.
That I think would be good. And I don't know if you've looked at, I mean, Florida has the Florida Star program, which is, I went through that last winter. I did that, and it was interesting. I mean, there was some good and some bad points in that, and I guess there's only so far that you can somewhat go with that, but it's
Yeah, Florida is funny there, Jim. They don't like rain sensors. They're looking at soil moisture and constantly changing run times through the clocks. Not even letting the system do it.
Yeah, but it was interesting. They had some, you know, like, I caught a mistake there. And again, I'm not the authority with they did a thing on MP rotators, and our precip rate was like ridiculous. You know, they went, oh, if you run this for 10 minutes, you're going to put water down an hour. You're going to put down an inch of water. How the hell's that going to happen when you just said that the head puts out 0.4, you know, but whatever. But anyway, basically, and to everybody's point about there's credence, I guess would be the word, right? Because we come out and it's perception. So contractors are maybe not always perceived in the best way, and the industry's changed. I mean, you've got a lot of experience on this call, for sure, and things have changed. You know, people used to go out. They used to work for an irrigation contractor, somebody who was, you know, was good at what they did even before a lot of the Irrigation Association stuff. But they learned, you know, this is what you do in the corners. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't do, you know what I mean? That's kind of changed quite a bit, and everybody's an irrigator. So that's where I'm saying we're pulling at the same piece of steak. When I see somebody with the CIC, or, you know, or a lead, like, you know what I mean, or somebody has, you know what I mean, some IA credentials, hey, I'm like, hey, that guy went through, you know, they passed, so they know what they should be doing. The problem is there's really not a great, and this is a New York problem, you know, where they really don't have a great vetting process. I mean, you go to Connecticut, those guys are super tuned because they all had to get the licenses, and there's a fear of loss. Imagine if we didn't have driver's licenses. What the hell? Run through the stop sign. You're not going to get points. You know what I mean? That's basically it. That's a very broad stroke, but whatever. I'm getting off but my thing is, like, how do you connect the dots? So yeah, maybe the IANY, you know, and you have your legal parameters. I'm not saying that lightly, with Water Authority as far as what you can do, whatever, but to come in and say, hey, we're really supporting this. Now you're giving the credence to the customers where they say, and that would help IANY too, potentially, where, hey, we've got certified guys where, you know, hey, you need help. And there's, you know, there's only so far that you could go with that too. But that's where I just looked at it, where, you know, you have a you know, a goal and things to accomplish in mind. And so, you know, so does everybody else. And how do we best do that kind of thing, you know, chicken and egg kind of thing, because the stuff is there. I mean, you know, the guys that know the right products, and the pressurized spray heads are great, but that's to correct the lack of knowledge in the first place.
Well,
Port
we have a
Washington, right, Mike? They have a
Yeah,
great.
we have a couple of places on Long Island where they're actually mandatory. Couple
Okay.
of water districts. And also, as far as your point on somebody going out with the water authority, actually, Nassau County had a great program years back where it was
New
the
York American
county
Water.
extension service had certified 2 people to do water audits.
Mhm.
So they went out and did audits on the systems and showed pretty much in Nassau County, they were finding on average the systems were only 45% efficient.
Yeah.
And that was a ridiculously low number, as we well know. So that actually, because the IA was with them at that point, once we became certified, we were actually on a list. These are certified people you may want to contact if you want this corrected. And that was just an open list. Anybody in the area that had a CIC, you were on there. You weren't one over the other.
Right.
And what I liked about it, because it was just somebody that went out and said, hey, this is garbage, and it had nobody with a financial interest in it, which is why I liked that it was, I want to say Consumer Affairs. It wasn't. It was that.
Business Bureau? Better Business Bureau?
I wasn't Better Business Bureau. It was
Like Cornell?
Cornell Cooperative Extension. Sorry, Cornell did it. So it was a separate entity, but you had no financial interest in it. It was just like, we're looking to see how we can help people water landscapes better or more efficiently. And that actually was what really helped the IA grow and get programs out there to people. That's where I got my training because of all that stuff that Cornell did. And, as I've said, I can never stop spewing why I'm here because it opened my eyes. It made my life a lot easier. And, I'm preaching to the choir, but it's how you got to do it.
Well, when I did the auditor, I realized how many bad systems and how many wrong things I really did.
Both, brother.
It was amazing. But you know what? The math doesn't lie. So for somebody independently to be able to come in and do that and show and say, hey, this is this, this is this, this is this. And, high tide in my mind raises all boats. So, I mean, that's basically it. And that's where I was getting at, where people working for contractors and learning, we've kind of lost that. And you have, I'm not going to sit here and admonish, but we all know what the hell's going on, especially in my area. It is really, really,
it's everywhere.
really bad. Yeah, but it's really bad.
People out of state, it's the same thing.
Yeah, and it's that's the control of it. You know what I mean? With and that's bringing it back to Suffolk, what you're trying to do. And Port Washington has a really good program. Not that I work there, but their thing, Mike, for even that, for the basis of
you missed my training last week with them.
I didn't know about it, so but otherwise I would have been on there torturing them as well. But so
torturing me, you mean?
Yeah, torturing you. But they have a really good thing. No. I mean, when I did limited stuff on there, we had a big, you had to have the pressure reducing valve. They had a locking ball valve. We had to draw the system. We had to show consumption. We didn't have to do it to scale, thank God.
Low. And what was the PSI at the last head?
Right. And what was and what it basically did is it knocked out a lot of the water wasters, and they were able to look at that. We have a couple water authorities up here that do it too. Scarsdale's one where you got to draw it. You know what I mean? And I'm no great shakes, but I went in there. I got a permit in 2 minutes. The guy next to me must have ran into me, says, I've been in here for 3 hours. And the guy's like, well, because you're not what you're doing is wrong, and they can tell. But basically it's control. Yeah. I don't know. That's whatever.
You either know it or you don't know it. And until you start getting into these classes, you don't realize what you don't know.
Right. But the public is the one we need to, how the hell do we get them to come to us, I guess?
We gotta come up with our got milk or pork the other white meat. You gotta find that saying to get it out there.
Right. All right. Well, that's my 50 cents.
I appreciate it.
Sorry.
Seth, you have somewhere to go, Seth?
Yes.
No, we do have to wrap up at 2:00.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay. No, Jim.
I'm shutting up now.
Joe, Mr. Tavalero, you got anything?
He looks like he's framing something.
Yeah, he's been doing something.
He's
I've seen his head a couple of
Is he?
times.
I mean, he's doing
Oh,
electrical. I see studs in the background. I don't know what he's doing. He's building a new airplane hangar.
Not down in Lawrence. He's not.
No, yeah. But that's the public's perception, you know, and that's probably murky water for, so to speak, for, you know, the water authority, you know, how to promote and what to do. You know what I mean? The smart controllers are great, but they're not the end all be all. It just controls when it comes on, not how. And that's where the irrigation guys come in. And that's really honestly where your real savings come in. The smart controllers, yes, will maybe knock the system off from running in the rain and stuff like that. But then what, you know, if you've still got an unbalanced system, you know what I mean, or something leaking or something like that, that's egregious and not proper.
That's what we're after. Which, you know, let's go after the low hanging fruit. That's where the DEC wanted to go. So that's why we're pushing this. And then as we move forward, now we'll bring up the other efficiencies, because as we get into these other contaminants and stuff that we have to get rid of and treat for, they're high electrical, high pumpage, high usage, high maintenance costs. Water's going to go up. And these are going to start showing up in 5 to 10 years as these, not loans. What do they call them? Seth, what are they? They're not loans. They're
grants.
Rebates. Bill credits.
Well, why don't you raise your water rates? That would be a way to do it for efficient systems.
Hey, some of us live here, right, Jim? Why don't you keep it down, pal?
Yeah.
What's that? What did he say?
Some of us
still live here.
Yeah, I mean that's so
No,
the
but your water's too cheap. I'll be blunt. It is.
Yeah,
It's
you're
too
actually
cheap.
right. I agree with you.
yeah.
It is.
that is
$360 a year is.
that has not been the opinion of our customers. We feel that way as well. We think it's pretty affordable. But believe me, we hear it when we change that, and we have changed it.
Let me mail them my water bill, and I have an efficient system, and then they'll shut up because.
Well, we recycle our water here, so they're charging for the same water over and over again.
There you go. No. That's just. I mean, you know, that's unfortunately, you know, what's going to really force the conservation is, you know, the water rates and how to tie all that together, and that's
that's why we have two different rates. That's why we have a two-tier rate system. That's why we have a threshold. If you use this much, you're charged at this rate. If you use this much, everything above that threshold is charged at a higher rate. We already do that.
What's the threshold? Do you know?
Oh, gee, I used to off the top of my head.
All right, it wasn't a trick question. I was just curious.
No. It's what is it? I believe it's 120 centicubic feet.
Per month or quarter?
Per quarter. I'm sorry, per quarter.
Okay.
Yeah, we only bill quarterly.
Okay. That's the other thing. If you go monthly, I think people see leaks quicker, because we actually had a thing. Yeah. My village, they were billing twice a year, and this guy had a bad toilet, and you know, went up and side down, up one side and down the other of me, because he had like a $3,500 bill for 6 months, and we found that he had a running toilet, and it was like, well, you know, could have found that quicker, but.
Yeah, I walk into houses all the time. I hear toilets running, and I go, "Did you flush the toilet recently?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "You got a running toilet. Why don't you fix it?" Oh,
yeah,
it doesn't cost
cheap.
me anything. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. So the threshold, by the way, I just looked it up. It is 120. It's 120 CCFs in a quarter. You hit the higher rate. The base rate is $1.586. And then the higher tier rate is $2.289. So it's a big upgrade.
Yeah. Well, I would say it should be higher than that, but that's just my.
Yeah.
You can leave Kevin Lewis bill out
I've
of it.
got some New York American Water customers that would love that rate.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. It's one of the benefits of being, you know, a non-for-profit supplier, that we get to have them as low as they are, but we still do have to worry about, you know, public reception, and when they go up, believe me, we hear about it.
Can you guys talk that grid?
Wouldn't that be nice? PSEG loves us because we're their best customer. We use more electricity than anybody in the county. So.
Maybe you guys should install one solar windmill off the South Shore just for you.
Just for I don't even think it'd be enough. We might need two. I don't know. It's us and then Stony Brook University. Yeah.
Is that right? That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, every we have 600 plus public supply wells. They all take a lot of power. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Time to go solar.
Yeah.
How are they going to run them at night when we need them?
Battery
Hakeem's
storage.
got a hand raised.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I want to say thank you guys for the information. And I just had a question for Kevin.
Yeah. What's up?
I remember you mentioned wireless flow meters. Are those out on the market already, or is that something you guys are working on?
They are out on the market. Yes.
Okay. I just had a question about that. And thank you guys. And I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to go. But I definitely appreciate the little class here, and I learned a lot. So thank you guys.
Appreciate you tuning in.
Yeah. Thank you, Hakeem.
Take care.